Mika stood with her henna-stained hands trembling. The ceremony was moments away, but Jaro's father stood up and said, "Not in my bloodline." What he didn't know was, she wasn't marrying for love alone. She came with a contract and a secret. Mika was a simple girl who spent her days sewing clothes in her mother's small shop. She didn't wear fancy clothes or speak big words. She just worked, smiled, and minded her business. People saw her as just a seamstress, someone who made clothes, not someone to be taken seriously. But Jaro, a respected young architect, saw something else in her. He would pass by her shop quietly, watching her focus, her kindness with customers, and the way she never complained, even when treated poorly. Over time, Jaro fell in love, not with her looks or status, but with her heart. When he finally told his family he wanted to marry Mika, they laughed. His sisters rolled their eyes. His mother said nothing, but it was his father, Chief Bako, who reacted the strongest. He was a proud man, deeply rooted in tradition. To him, Mecca wasn't from a family that deserved their name. She wasn't from the right background, the right class, or the right bloodline. "A tailor's daughter," he scoffed. "Never in my bloodline." But Jaro didn't care. He had made up his mind. He proposed to Mika in the same shop where he first saw her, with scissors and fabric all around. Mika was touched, but she didn't say yes right away. She had seen too much to be naive. She knew his family would try to break her, so she made one request, one small condition before she would agree to marry him. She asked for a marriage contract, not just signed by the two of them, but by the entire family. A contract that would show they all agreed to this union. Jaro didn't hesitate. He trusted her, he loved her, and he agreed. The plan was quiet, simple, and almost invisible. No one suspected the girl behind the sewing machine was thinking ahead. They thought she was just happy to be chosen. But Mika wasn't just a seamstress. She was someone who had been underestimated her whole life. And this time, she was ready. As soon as the wedding plans began, Mika could feel the coldness from Jaro's family. They didn't hide their dislike for her. It was clear in their eyes, in their words, in their actions. To them, she didn't belong. Jaro's sisters would whisper and giggle every time Mecca entered the room. They looked her up and down, mocking her simple clothes, saying things like, "Is that what she's wearing to meet us? Looks like something from her sewing table." They made her feel small, like a joke they shared behind closed doors. Jaro's mother didn't bother pretending. She barely spoke to Mecca. Sometimes she would walk past her without even a greeting. Other times she'd call her the girl, never her name. To her, Mecca was just a poor girl from the market, someone not good enough to sit at their table or be part of their family. But the worst came from Chief Bako himself. He didn't sugarcoat his feelings. He told Jaro straight to his face, "If you want to marry her, fine, but don't ever think of bringing that girl into my house." His words were sharp, and his tone was final. Mecca heard it all. She saw the sneers, felt the rejection, and endured the silence. But she never cried in front of them. She never begged for their approval. She just smiled, a soft, quiet smile that didn't show pain, but strength. What they didn't know was that Mecca was not just absorbing the insults, she was writing them down, not in her mind, but on paper. Every cruel word, every humiliation, every warning. She kept a private notebook where she noted every moment they made her feel unwelcome. To anyone watching, Mecca looked calm, maybe even clueless. But inside, she was building something, not revenge, but protection. She didn't scream or shout. She didn't fight back with anger. She simply watched and wrote, because Mika believed something deeply. People may forget what they said, but paper does not. And someday, their own words would speak for her. While Jaro tried to make peace between his family and the woman he loved, Mika stayed steady. She didn't let their hatred shake her. She had lived a life where she was always the outsider. This wasn't new. What was new was that this time, she had something they didn't: patience and a plan. And with every insult they threw at her, they unknowingly helped her build it. Jaro loved Mecca deeply, and when she asked for just one thing before their wedding, he didn't even hesitate. She didn't want gold. She didn't ask for a fancy ceremony. All she wanted was a written agreement, a simple wedding contract. In it, she asked that every member of his family, especially Chief Bako, sign a short blessing for the marriage. Just a few lines saying they approved and wished the couple well. It sounded harmless. It looked harmless. No one really thought much of it. Jaro took the contract to his father, hopeful that he would at least sign for the sake of peace. At first, Chief Bako refused. He laughed out loud and said, "This is nonsense, my signature changes nothing." But Jaro insisted, calmly reminding him that it was Meka's only condition. After a long sigh, Chief Bako finally picked up the pen. Without even reading the document properly, he signed. "Let her have her paper," he said with a smirk. "It means nothing." And with that, the contract was signed and put away. But what no one noticed was the last page. Meka had quietly added one more sheet at the back. It was sealed in an envelope and attached to the contract. When Jaro saw it, he asked, "What's this?" She simply smiled and said, "It's for the wedding day. A small surprise." He didn't question it further. He trusted her. After all, everything looked legal. Everything looked normal. Even the family lawyer didn't bother checking. Everyone was too focused on trying to stop the wedding emotionally. They didn't care what was written on a few pages of paper. That sealed envelope stayed hidden for weeks. No one touched it. No one even thought about it. Meka didn't talk about it again, and everyone assumed it was just some silly love letter or a personal vow. But it wasn't. That page was the heart of her plan. Quiet, smart, and powerful. It was the protection she built with her own hands. The very same hands they mocked for sewing clothes were now crafting something they would never expect. While the family continued mocking and planning behind her back, Meka was calm. She had given them a chance to welcome her. She had asked for their blessing in writing, thinking maybe they would mean it. But when they signed without reading, they gave her more than permission. They gave her power. And she tucked that power safely away, waiting for the right day to open it. A day before the wedding, while everyone was making last-minute plans, something unexpected happened. Chief Bako called a private meeting with his family. His face was serious, his voice cold. He looked straight at Jaro and said, "Enough of this foolishness. I've tried to be patient. Now you must choose, this girl or your inheritance." The room fell silent. His words were heavy, and everyone turned to Jaro, waiting to hear his answer. Jaro stood quietly for a moment. He looked at his father, then at his mother, and finally at his sisters. He knew what this meant. If he chose Meka, he would lose everything: his family's wealth, the house he grew up in, the company he had worked for. But then he remembered the woman who stood by him through everything, the woman who never fought back when she was insulted, the woman who only asked for a contract, not diamonds. And without any doubt in his voice, Jaro replied, "Then I choose her." Chief Bako's eyes widened with shock. He slammed the table and shouted, "So be it! The wedding is cancelled. Tell the guests it's off." He stormed out of the room, and the family rushed to follow him. Some tried to call the caterers. Others started messaging guests. They thought they could stop everything in one night. But what they didn't know was that Meka and Jaro had already completed all the legal steps. The wedding wasn't just a church event or a family party. It was legally registered at the courthouse. The documents had been signed and filed days before. The union was already official in the eyes of the law. Even if the ceremony didn't happen, they were still husband and wife on paper. Meka had prepared for this moment. She had seen the signs. She knew Bako might try to stop the wedding at the last second, and she made sure there was nothing he could do to undo it. Everything was done properly, legally, and quietly. While Bako shouted about cancelling the wedding, Meka simply sat in her room, calm and focused. She knew the wedding would go on, maybe not with their approval, but with the truth on her side. The guests, confused and unsure, still planned to attend. Whispers began spreading. Why cancel now? What happened? But Meka said nothing. She just waited, because this wedding wasn't just about love anymore. It was about standing strong, even when the world tried to break you. And tomorrow, when she walked down that aisle, she would walk with her head high, knowing the fight was already won. The wedding day came, but it didn't feel like a normal celebration. Guests arrived one by one, looking around with confused faces. Some whispered to each other, "I thought the wedding was cancelled." Others just shrugged and took their seats, waiting to see what would happen. There were no big decorations, no loud music, just a quiet tension in the air, like something was about to explode. Chief Bako walked into the venue wearing a black outfit, not grey, not navy, but deep, dark black. People noticed. It was a wedding, and he was dressed like it was a funeral. His face was hard, lips tight, eyes sharp. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't smile. He just sat down in the front row, arms crossed, his presence cold and heavy. Then came Mecca. She walked down the aisle alone. No bridesmaids, no music, no father by her side, just her and her calm footsteps. Her dress wasn't flashy, but it fit her perfectly. She held no bouquet, only confidence. Every step she took, the room got quieter. People stared, some with pity, some with surprise. But Mika didn't look left or right. She kept her eyes forward, head held high, heart steady. She wasn't just walking toward her groom. She was walking toward justice. Jaro stood waiting for her, his eyes soft and proud. The pastor welcomed everyone and began the ceremony. Everything seemed okay, until one moment changed it all. The pastor turned and asked gently, "Do both families bless this union?" There was silence. Then Chief Bako slowly stood up. He looked at the pastor, then at Mika. His voice rang through the hall. "This marriage is cursed," he said loudly. Gasps filled the room. People looked at each other, unsure of what to do or say. The air felt heavy. Even Jaro's hands began to tremble slightly. But Mecca, she didn't flinch. She calmly bent down and reached under the table in front of her. Everyone watched closely. What was she doing? Was she running away? Was she hiding tears? Number Mika pulled out a thick brown envelope. Her fingers were steady, her eyes calm. She stood tall, turned to the pastor and gently handed it to him. "This," she said in a clear voice, "is our full wedding contract." The room went completely silent again. All eyes were on the envelope. No one had expected this. They thought Mecca came empty-handed, without power, without protection. But now, they were about to see what she had been holding on to all along. The sealed truth was finally in the open, and it was just the beginning. The pastor held the envelope in his hands, looking a little unsure. Everyone in the room was silent, waiting, watching. Mecca nodded at him gently, giving him the signal to go ahead. He opened the envelope slowly and pulled out the last page of the wedding contract, the one no one had seen before. His eyes scanned the paper for a few seconds, and then he cleared his throat. He read the words out loud, slowly and clearly, so everyone could hear. If any member of the groom's family denounces the union after signing, their entire estate transfers to the bride, as per Clause 7 of the Customary Marriage Protection Act. The room froze. Gasps echoed from the crowd. Yaro's sisters looked at each other in shock. His mother covered her mouth with her hand, but it was Chief Bako who looked like the ground had disappeared beneath him. His face turned pale. He gripped the armrest of his chair like he was trying to hold on to something solid. "What act?" he whispered, his voice shaky. Jaro turned to him slowly. There was no anger on his face, just truth. "The one you helped pass when you were Minister of Family Affairs," he replied. You could hear a pin drop. No one said a word. All eyes were on Chief Bako. This man, who once stood tall and proud, who thought he was in control, now looked completely lost. He had signed the paper himself. He didn't read it. He had laughed at it. He thought it was just a silly request from a tailor's daughter. But Mika wasn't just any girl. She had studied him. She had listened to his old speeches. She had researched the laws he helped create. And then, using his own words and power, she built her protection, quietly, smartly, and legally. The lawyer in the crowd stood up and confirmed it was all real. The law existed. The clause was legal. And since Chief Bako had spoken against the marriage after signing his blessing, his family's entire estate, properties, businesses, everything, was now being transferred to Mecca. It wasn't theft. It wasn't revenge. It was justice, written in ink and sealed in silence. Mecca didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just stood calmly, her hands resting gently in front of her, as if all of this was expected. And in truth, it was. She had simply waited for the moment when paper would speak louder than pride. And now, everyone knew. This was never just about a wedding. It was about a woman who refused to be looked down on and used the law to make them see her worth. As the final words of the contract were read out, the silence in the hall was heavy. All eyes were still on Chief Bako. His hands began to tremble. His breathing grew fast. His lips moved, but no sound came out. And then, without warning, his body gave in. He collapsed back into his seat, eyes wide open in shock. People rushed toward him, his wife, his daughters, even some guests. But he didn't move. He was still conscious, but it was clear. His strength had left him. The room was no longer quiet. It exploded with whispers, gasps, and confusion. Did that really just happen? Is it true? Is this contract real? Guests murmured in disbelief, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Jaro stood frozen beside Mika, his face a mixture of awe and concern. And through it all, Mika remained still, calm, steady, and focused. The family's lawyer stood up slowly and walked to the center of the hall. Everyone turned toward him. He cleared his throat and spoke in a serious tone. Yes, the clause is legal. The act is real. The contract is valid. And since it was signed and a public denouncement followed, the estate transfer has already started. There's nothing we can do to reverse it. Another wave of shock rolled through the guests. Chief Bako's daughters started arguing, panicking. One shouted, "How can this be happening?" Another said, "She tricked us." But Mika didn't trick anyone. She had done everything openly. They just never cared to look closely. They were too busy laughing at her, mocking her, and treating her like she didn't belong. Mika didn't shout. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. The paper had done the speaking. The law had done the work, and their own pride had made them blind. Chief Bako, once the strongest voice in the family, now sat silent, powerless. He had built his name on rules, tradition, and control, but he never imagined that someone he looked down on would understand those rules even better than him and use them with grace. People weren't angry at Mika. In fact, many admired her. She hadn't stolen a single thing. She didn't fight dirty. She had taken their power, shaped it, and handed it back to them. All she asked for was respect, and when she didn't get it, she found a way to protect herself. The wedding continued, but everything had changed, not just in wealth or family power, but in the way people now looked at Mika. She was no longer the quiet tailor's daughter. She was the woman who turned silence into strength and used wisdom, not revenge, to win. As the wedding continued and people began to whisper about everything that had just happened, some guests looked at Mika with new eyes. They started to wonder, how did she do it? How did a girl like her outsmart a man like Chief Bako? That's when the flashbacks began, one after the other, quiet moments from Mika's life that no one had ever seen. The first flashback showed Mika sitting at her mother's small tailoring shop, sewing clothes late into the night. But beside her sewing machine was not just fabric and thread. There were books, thick books on law, family rights, and government policies. She would stitch for a while, then flip a page, stitch again, then take notes. No one knew, not even her mother. Mika had decided to study in secret. She didn't have a degree or a classroom, but she had hunger. She had a reason. Another memory came up. Mika at home, watching old videos of Chief Bako's speeches. He was once a proud government man, known for his strong opinions on family values. Mika listened to every word. She wrote down the names of every law he mentioned. She watched how he carried himself, how he believed no one could challenge him. And while others clapped for him, Mika took notes, not to praise him, but to understand him. One night, we see her sitting by candlelight, writing something on a piece of paper. It was the first draft of the wedding contract. She read it over and over, fixing small details, searching for the right words. She found a law, an old one, that protected people like her. It had a small line in it, something most people would miss. But Mika didn't miss it. She added that line into the contract, hidden but strong. She built it carefully, making sure it couldn't be broken. In another flashback, we see her slipping the final page, the sealed clause, into the contract folder while Jaro was asleep. She looked at him with love, but also with a quiet sadness. She knew his family might try to destroy her. She had to be ready. Love had brought her into this marriage, but survival made her prepare. The final flashback shows Mika walking past Chief Bako's house one day. He stood outside, talking loudly to someone, not even noticing her. He looked right through her. To him, she didn't matter. She wasn't important. But now, in the present moment, that same girl had changed everything. Mika wasn't just lucky, she was prepared. They thought she was weak. They thought she was simple. But while they looked down on her, she looked ahead. And when the time came, she used everything they ignored to build a future no one could take from her. The wedding went on, but the mood was unlike any other. Guests stayed seated, whispering from one row to the next. Some clapped softly, unsure what to feel. Others just stared at Mika, still trying to understand what they had witnessed. There were no loud cheers, no joyful dancing, just quiet nods, tears from a few, and a feeling that something very big had just happened. Jaro stood beside Mika, holding her hand tightly. His face showed everything: shock, pride, love, and a little sadness. He had lost his family's support, but in that moment, He knew he had chosen right. He didn't look back at his father or sisters. He looked only at Mika, and she looked straight ahead, calm and steady, like she had been from the beginning. Chief Bako sat quietly in the front row, unable to speak. His daughters whispered angrily behind him, still confused, still blaming Mika. But the truth was out now, and no matter what anyone thought, they could not change it. The contract was real, the law was clear, and Mika had won, not with anger or tricks, but with wisdom and patience. As the pastor finished the final prayers and the couple was announced as husband and wife, there were scattered claps. Some people stood, others stayed seated. It was not the celebration most expected, but it was powerful. Mecca didn't smile too wide or look around for praise. She simply held Jaro's hand and walked out with him, step by step, with her head high. Later, as they stood together away from the crowd, Jaro looked at her and said, "I didn't know you were carrying all of this alone." Mika turned to him with a soft smile and replied, "They never gave me a seat at the table, so I built one out of paper and made them sit." Her words were simple, but full of meaning. She didn't fight to destroy, she fought to be seen. And when they refused to see her, she used the very tools they respected, contracts, laws, and signatures, to take her place. Before the newspapers heard the story, before it spread on social media, before the name Mika became something powerful, there was just this quiet moment. A bride, a groom, and a truth too strong to ignore. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a turning point. And even though the world hadn't heard the full story yet, everyone in that hall knew. They had just witnessed history. Months passed, and the story that once caused whispers at a wedding became a movement across the country. People who once judged Mika now looked at her with respect. Chief Bako's grand buildings, once symbols of his pride and power, no longer carried his name. Across the gates, bold new signs read, "House of Mika." It shocked many at first, but no one could deny the impact she was making. Instead of keeping the wealth for herself, Mika did something different. She opened the doors of those buildings to young girls, girls who were once ignored or mocked because of where they came from or how little they had. She gave them shelter, education, and a safe place to dream. Every wall told a story of second chances. Every room carried hope. These homes weren't just buildings anymore. They became a symbol of what was possible when a woman rose after being looked down on. People started to talk. News outlets, blogs, and social media posts exploded with Mika's story. But what caught everyone's attention the most wasn't just the transformation of property or power. It was a single photograph from her wedding. In that photo, Mika stood next to Jaro, calm and strong, wearing her simple wedding dress. But behind them, hanging on the wall, was a framed piece of paper, the contract, the very one she had written with her own hands. It was clear in the picture, like a quiet crown sitting above her head. People didn't share the photo for fashion or romance. They shared it because it told a bigger story, of smartness, patience, and boldness. The image went viral. Thousands of girls and women across the country reposted it with captions like, "Know your worth and build your own table." Some called her a hero, others called her a warrior in heels, but Mika never let it get to her head. She smiled, stayed humble, and kept working. As for Jaro, he stood beside her through everything. He was no longer just the son of Chief Bako. He had become something greater, Mika's partner, her biggest supporter. And when reporters once asked him how it felt to be married to someone like her, his answer was simple but powerful. "I didn't just marry a woman, I married a legacy." That one line melted hearts and echoed across the internet. Because he was right. Mika didn't just change her life, she changed the rules. She showed the world that quiet strength, smart choices, and a brave heart can build something bigger than revenge or riches.